Thank you. So now moving on to item 12, the Three Waters Section 17A Review Interim Update. And this is exactly what it says. It's an interim update on a review which is currently in flight. Teresa, thank you for joining us. And thank you for the work that you're doing in this project. And Dave, welcome to the table as well. So, Teresa, do you want to start by making some comments?
Mr Chairman, I might start just making comments. Really, I'm going to reiterate the executive summary. For the new councillors, we have attached terms of reference, the original terms of reference, because they were approved prior to the elections. So it's just to fill in the background of some of that information. But the Section 17A review, to remind you, is around looking at the cost effectiveness of the current arrangement. It talks about a focus needing to have a look at the governance, have a look at the funding and the service delivery. And basically, I think you'll find that in the terms of references, a bit more detail around that, and you'll recognise that a lot of the terms of reference is taken straight out of legislation, basically under the Local Government Act. If you do a Section 17A review, you must do this, this, this and this. So, the review of Three Waters drinking water, wastewater and stormwater has been undertaken by staff with an external governance group and an external peer review. And that's really to put some independence into it, Mr Chairman. And again, I know the existing councillors that were here before the elections are well aware of that. But again, just a little bit of background for the new councillors. We've gone through the establishment and assessment phases, are complete, and we're now looking at the various options that are there before we come back to council. If you have a look, I think one of the attachments is also the logic map, and I think one of the important parts is that under that response column there, about some of the things that we're trying to find. We need an organisation that enables effective and efficient delivery, obviously, that's part of the Act, and because it's there, just all the models need to be, we need some criteria which we need to look at these various options against, and these are basically the criteria. Proactive, informed decision making, sufficient funding. We need a compliant water services, and that gets very difficult, Mr Chairman, because the rules are changing probably as we sit here at the moment, because central government, as you are all aware, are in the middle of a major reform. And that's one of the reasons we've come back with a recommendation in this, that we would like to extend out the reporting back. In the original time, you asked us to report back in March. The government's still in that process, and one of the reasons we would like to extend our reporting regime out to September. If your next one, engagement increased socially, I think we've got a community that's also, I think, very, I was going to say attached to the water, but that, water is one of the things that is at the forefront of our society at the moment, whether it be through irrigation, through nitrate levels, through climate change and wide range. We talk about water services delivered in a holistic, whole of life cycle approach, and recognises water as a tauhanga. And so the other piece of information we've got in here, Ngātahu's just put out a think piece, I think it's probably more than a think piece, but a discussion document on their approach to water. And it's, as an important partner of council, we consider it important that we actually reflect on that document and see whether it has any influence in there. And that's one of the other reasons we were actually asking for that extension out to September. Finally, the last one down that response thing is effective policy framework direction enables long-term planning, climate change, and I think all of council recognise the importance of climate change. And if you have a look at the Three Waters, it's probably going to have more impact on those than anything else, I would say. Possibly the transport network's going to be reasonably influenced as well, but certainly around flood protection, sea level rise, different intensities of storm around all that is going to be quite important. Regulatory reform, which I've briefly talked about, culture and community expectations. So basically this is an interim update, but really I think the big thing we're asking is for an extension of the review completion date to September. In saying that, if we can, depending on what the government does, where we do, we will want to bring back it to you as soon as we can. We think September gives us the amount of time that we may need before we hit a crunch date. We do have a crunch date around having to renew contracts. So we would either have to come back to you asking for a further extension of our current contract arrangements, or if we can conclude this piece of work, it will then potentially blend in very well with that piece of work. So that's really all I've got to say, Mr. Chairman, and I'm happy if any questions to be asked of Teresa.
Yep, excellent. So bearing in mind that we've got a workshop coming up on this as well, which is the opportunity for a deeper and broader discussion. This is just the interim update. I think, Dave, you've articulated the reason that an extension to September is a good idea. There have been a number of moving parts here, and the environment is quite different for a number of reasons than it was at the time that we put this piece of work in train. So thank you very much indeed for that. So that's the introduction from staff. Teresa, you're happy to answer any questions? Yep, yes. But bearing in mind we do have this workshop later on, are there any questions for Teresa? All right, so what we are doing is receiving the information that's provided in the report, and then the substantive thing that we're doing is extending the review completion date for September 2020 based on the reasons that have been articulated very clearly from the table today. So Pauline, you're happy to move. Is there a seconder? Sarah, happy to second. Is there any debate? All those in favour say aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, and thank you for the report.